Covington and Masvidal, guys, are they coaching the Ultimate Fighter? One thing we know for sure, they're fighting at some point. We're talking about it right now. What's up, Barnhill family? Welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
So, Nick, we have a fight that we can talk about now that both of us, I know, are ready to just sink our teeth into, hoping that it gets made. I almost hope this video kind of wills this fight into reality.
Yes.
I feel like they're very close to making it. It makes sense right now, given the 170 division. That fight I'm talking about is Colby Covington versus Jorge Masvidal, roommates gone bad.
Oh, yeah. No, and that's a great title for it, working title. And there's
There we
more
go.
roommates in the Ultimate Fighter, so maybe it'll be able to stem some future relationships. We could have a roommates part 2 5 or 10 years down the road.
The roommates card, like
Yeah.
every time the guys that live together have gone sour.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe they make each roommate fight each other. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy to see the Ultimate Fighter coming back. And I
Yeah,
do
me too.
think that after 28, whatever seasons, it was a lot, almost 30,
Yeah.
if not 30. After that many seasons, it did start to get a little bit
Monotonous.
And I guess we saw the same things happening again and again. And oftentimes in this sport, you have people that are great fighters, but they're not great entertainers. And sometimes it made for great content and entertainment, and sometimes it just didn't. It was kind of flat.
Yeah.
There's definitely no way with these two coaches, and this is all speculative, but with Jorge Masvidal and Colby Covington being the coaches in there, this is not going to be just a fireworks season.
No, it's going to be an incredible season, and I think it needed a little time to breathe. You know, certain shows, when they come out just, year after year, you have 2 seasons a year, and you're just churning out fighter after fighter, and you're learning the backstory of all these fighters, and then, trying to keep track of it. Who made it to the UFC? How are they doing? It gets a bit overwhelming at times. And I personally think holding off on the Ultimate Fighter for a little while gave way to, Tuesday night looking for a fight, Dana White Contender Series, all of these other exciting shows on these, the ESPN Plus platform, things like that have really also given way to a lot of great fighters in the UFC right now. Alex Perez, obviously, being one of them, making it through Dana White Contender Series.
First one to fight for a title, and he came up short, but he made it.
Exactly. And in a lot of ways, if I was a fighter wanting to come up into the UFC, I would go for the Contender Series rather than the Ultimate Fighter, because literally all I have to do is go put on one good performance and get that contract, whereas the Ultimate Fighter is a bit more of a journey. But that being said, I also feel like it's a give and take, because you get the journey of, people knowing who you are and watching you on a week in and week out basis, whereas with the Contender Series, you don't really have that much of a connection with the fans until you actually get in there and start to build your name.
Right, and the Contender Series is built perfectly for today's world. We love instant gratification. They're really good at marketing fighters and kind of building hype, even around people that we don't know. I mean, they did a good job with the Sean O'Malley's and some of the people that they've brought up in the Contender Series, and the way they follow them in the 2 weeks leading up to the fight. You don't know who they are, then all of a sudden they're on the map. And then the Contender Series has been doing great numbers. So you're getting millions of views on these new fighters right off the bat. I mean, it's got to be nerve-wracking for some of these guys. And the Ultimate Fighter was like I said, after 28, 29 seasons, it started to lose a little bit of its ratings, and people were just a little tired of that format. But now I feel like people are going to be hungry for that style of format, because the first thing we think when we see somebody new that we might like, or maybe even dislike, is we want to know more about them. Yeah. And the Ultimate Fighter gives us that chance. So it's really up to the fighters to make it interesting for us. And I know they have a lot on their plate with competing, and it's been said, and I totally agree with this, it's the toughest tournament it's the toughest competition in all of sports. Yeah. It's the toughest thing to go through to get to the promised land, which is the UFC or whatever.
Living somewhere you're not used to living, making weight multiple times, training every day, training with the coaches that are not your coach.
Living with the people that you have to fight, sitting there at the dinner table with them. Another thing I would like to point out about this is I need to thank Dana White for this, and I think all the fighters need to thank Dana White as well. Growing up, if you liked football, there was a path, and it went Pop Warner and or middle school and kid leagues, feeder leagues,
right,
as a young kid, and then you move into high school football, and then you move into college football, and it's very difficult to get there. But if you can get into, let's say, a D1 program, the next step is the NFL if you're good enough, and all you have to do is be good enough, and the stepping stones are there for you.
Right.
If same thing goes with basketball, you don't have to play quite as long in college, but you need to be really good in high school, and then
there's a clear-cut path. If you ask somebody, how do I do this, you can point them to the path.
Right.
Whether they're good enough to make it is another thing all in and of itself, but there is a path.
Right. And it's as simple as when you go up to your coach and you say, Coach, I want to play in the NFL, and you're a 10-year-old kid, and you want to live your dream out. They go, okay, well, we need you to do this, 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 and this can get you here. That wasn't the case for the UFC, for mixed martial arts, and it really still isn't. But I do love that Dana White is kind of creating that stepping stone, that clear-cut pathway for fighters. And it, obviously the beginning part of your career, the amateur days or the early pro fights are still something that you have to figure out yourself. But a 3-0 fighter can get on Contender Series. He can get into the Ultimate Fighter, and that is really cool for young fighters, and it gives people that are watching, I think, a lot of hope as to how they could crack into the UFC, whereas as of until right now, it's kind of been a mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also I would venture to say even one step further, the other fight promotions that are on the UFC app that you see, you have the Invictas for the females, LFA. And certain local LFA local promotions that are on that not ESPN, but the UFC platform. And so I think that they are creating multiple avenues in which you can say, it's not quite as clear-cut as middle school football, high school football, college football, pro football, as you said, but there is a path. Right. There is a path. I know I need to win a couple amateur fights, and I know if I win the amateur fights, I'm going pro. And then if I win a couple, I can start to look at, applying for the Contender Series, applying for Ultimate Fighter,
right?
And that I can actually do this, and if I continue to exceed,
right? And if the Ultimate Fighter, let's just say they don't have anything booked up for your weight class or whatever, you can look. Okay, well, let's see. Maybe the Contender Series is in need of a bantamweight or a X whatever weight, and you go, I can fill that spot, and then you have to use things like social media to your advantage, get your footage and whatever you have to bring and offer to the table in front of the eyes of the people that matter. And Dana White, just like everybody else and these other people, they're on the internet. If you do something really impressive in your pro debut or your second or third pro MMA fight, it could be seen by the people that matter the most. And you could find yourself on the Contender Series in 2 weeks, because they're doing short notice stuff. I don't know if you've seen, but a lot of people aren't getting long fight camps for this. They're getting the call from Dana White. Hey, in 2 weeks, you want to be on the Contender Series? I got a tough fight for you, but if you win it in spectacular fashion, you're in the UFC. So it's making people stay disciplined, dedicated, and on alert.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And speaking of the two guys that we think, we're speculating at least, are going to be fighting next, which is Colby Covington and Jorge Masvidal, those two are going to bring out the best in these characters and these young kids up and coming, because you're going to see what two of the best workers in the game do to garner the attention that they garner.
Yeah.
And so I think it's going to, one, you're going to get a ton of drama on the show. Two, you're going to see the others, the competitors on the show rise to the occasion. And again, this is assuming that they're the two that they pick for the show. But I personally can't think of anybody better to pick for coaches than those two. One, because it's going to make for great TV, especially when you're bringing a show back that was falling down a little bit in the ratings. You want to bring it back in a big way. And then you want to have a mega fight, there was exceptions to the rule. Not all, coaches of the Ultimate Fighter ended up fighting each other, but most of them did.
Right.
I don't know the exact numbers, but most of them did. And I would say that, you're expecting a big fight and a big showdown between the coaches. At the end of it, what better way to do it than Masvidal and Covington?
Yeah, and I mean, that's an amazing fight. We could do a 30-minute conversation just on that fight alone. But I think this is going to build to such a perfect fight. And more fighters, I would venture to say, because let's just say there's 16 going into the house, they're going to have more of the mindset and the personality of a George Masvidal and less of a Colby Covington. Colby Covington is a very polarizing figure. You love him or you hate him. And I have a feeling that he might draft a couple people onto his team that don't like him. And they might be a little bit of marks and watch the sport. They're in the sport, but they don't like that kind of personality, but they're going to have to separate their differences and take him as their head coach and kind of listen to him because he's clearly doing all the right things. And it's so funny because every time for the past 4 or 5 years now with Conor McGregor in the world, people have gone, this is the biggest fight that the UFC can make, of course, besides Conor. Or this is the biggest news that the UFC can possibly put out, of course, besides Conor. I would venture to say that there's not a person you could match Conor McGregor up with to be the coach in The Ultimate Fighter that would be more interesting or more exciting than these two being paired up together. This is just something that both parties bring so much to the table. And I get people were saying, well, maybe Khabib and Conor will coach. I don't even think that would be as
entertaining.
Entertaining. Yeah, I think because those two, like we were saying a few weeks ago, their personalities just don't bounce off each other well.
Yeah, you have to have the back and forth with the right dance partner, and in the cage and in the build-up. And that's where Conor missed the mark in that fight was he didn't gauge that situation correctly.
Right.
You can't talk to Nate Diaz the same way you talk to Khabib, and expect the same result. So I think these two, the back and forth is going to be just lit.
Yeah,
it's going to be ridiculous.
Yeah, they can't get it right, and they're never going to get it right again. They're on bad terms, and it's going to be so fun to watch them be forced to be around each other.
Yeah.
And obviously the cameras are going to be on, so you're going to get the amplified Colby Covington, but you're also going to get the amplified George Masvidal, and there's going to be, there's always going to be an audience around them with the fighters being there and then the cameras being on. So I'm so excited for this. And it's funny because I was one of those people that was like, I've seen so many seasons of The Ultimate Fighter. It's like, give me something new. Dana White threw the looking for a fight at us, and then he started Contender Series. I've been loving that, but now I want something with a little bit more substance to it. Ultimate Fighter is the perfect thing to bring back.
Absolutely. And just speaking about like the X's and O's of this potential fight, which I think it's fair to speculate this fight is going to happen.
Yeah, we say most fights, most coaches in The Ultimate Fighter get paired up to fight each other, and some don't. These two 100% will be fighting each other at the end of the season.
I'm going to go ahead and stick my neck out on the line and say they are coaching The Ultimate Fighter based on only the evidence I've heard and read from a couple of sources, and I just have a gut feeling that's what they're going to do. And I'm going to go ahead and say for sure, even if I'm wrong about that, they're going to be fighting at some point. They're going to get in there and they're going to fight each other. So just speaking about that potential matchup, which I do think is next for both of them, here's the interesting thing about Jorge Masvidal. Everybody always says Jorge's a striker. He's a street fighter. He comes from the Kimbo Slice, backyard brawling days. And they don't really give him a lot of credit for being a good grappler. And his style is not a grappling heavy style. He likes to get in your face. He likes to make it a dogfight. He likes to knock you out. He likes to drag you into deep waters and beat you down. He's that kind of guy.
Right.
But he's always the first fighter to raise his hand and say, I'll fight that wrestler. Ben Askren, Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman. He sees something in his game that makes him confident enough in his ability to neutralize a super high-level grappler's ability to take him down.
Yeah.
Even though Kamaru was obviously successful, Ben Askren was very much not successful.
Yeah.
And he's saying, he wants this Colby Covington fight. And those two have felt each other in the gym. They've trained together probably hundreds, if not thousands of hours. And I truly believe that Masvidal believes that he can win that fight.
Of course. I mean, there's no fighter on the roster that Masvidal doesn't think he can't beat, in my opinion. And this one, there's just added fuel to it because there seems like a genuine dislike for Colby Covington. Whatever their falling out was personality-wise or their personal issues, that has stemmed a great feud for us fans to enjoy in the public eye. They have a beef that is viewed by us, and we get to enjoy it, and then we get we get feud and we get feud resolution.
Yeah.
We're gonna figure out this. At the end of the fight, they're probably gonna shake hands and be fine.
Yeah.
I don't think there's gonna be a glove tap before when they separate after the ref tells them the final thing before they get the fight started. But I think at the end of the fight, they're going to realize this is exactly what they needed. And I don't think they're going to be friends again. They're definitely not going to be roommates again, but they will respect each other.
Yeah, I agree. And, when you think about the fight itself, the first thing that comes to mind when you think Colby Covington across the cage from Jorge Masvidal is that Covington's probably going to wear him down and, use his wrestling and get in there and, work the clinch on the cage, takedowns, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing about Colby is, and I think Colby will probably be the favorite coming into that fight. I would say that he'll be the betting odds favorite. I do think it's closer than most people would assume.
It's not going to be a good one to bet on.
No, probably, unless the odds come out really crazy. But I don't see that happening. But what I do will say about Colby Covington is that he's not known to knock a lot of people out. Mm-hmm. And George Masvidal is not known to get knocked out.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get worn down very easily. I mean, we saw him go, the distance with Usman. Masvidal is a very durable fighter, and he does have a better gas tank than you would think. And I don't see any way that this isn't a 5-round firefight between these two.
I think you're right. And, Kamaru Usman has come out and said, before, after, and in between all of his fights, he goes, I might not have the most knockouts on the roster, but I don't want to go out there and first round knockout people. I want to take them all the way through 3 rounds or 5 rounds, whatever I'm fighting. And if it's championship fights, it's always 5 rounds. And then I want them to lose all 5 rounds and then not want to fight me again.
Yeah.
As soon as the post-fight press conference happened in Abu Dhabi for George Masvidal, he was going, I want to get that fight back again. Now, I obviously understand there's 12 pounds of gold and a title.
Yeah.
So the second of 2 titles at 170 that he wants and is up for grabs if he fights Kamaru Usman again. So that's a little bit obvious. But he is not afraid to fight Kamaru Usman again, which is something that him and Colby Covington have in common, but they don't have it in common with anybody else besides them two. You feel Kamaru Usman, and you feel him for 5 rounds or 5 rounds almost.
T. Wood's not calling for that fight again.
Right. People aren't just like, let me get back in there with him for another 5 rounds. Jorge Masvidal is and Colby Covington is. And I think it's the perfect number 1 contenders matchup while we figure out between Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman who the champ is going to be.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a gimme that Kamaru is going to win that fight necessarily.
No,
that's a great fight. And then I think if Burns is able to grab that strap, you see both of those guys just screaming for that fight because I think both of them would feel like they match up well against Burns. Whether or not they really do is yet to be determined. But I think that Covington, that's just if Burns is able to grab this strap, and then I'm correct in saying that they do make Masvidal and Covington happen next, I think that whoever wins that fight, one is going to get Burns, or Usman for that matter, whoever wins that fight, but 2, they're going to be just screaming from the rooftops for that fight.
Absolutely, and as long as it's not super competitive or somebody gets robbed and we see a rematch, I see this belt getting kind of tossed around in the hands of a few different fighters.
Yeah.
And, it might go to Kamaru Usman, go to Gilbert Burns from Kamaru Usman, and then venture into the BMF realm with Colby and Jorge, and then come back to Usman at some point. Yeah. And then who knows, maybe Chimaev will be knocking on the door.
That's what's interesting, right? Because if Chimaev just goes in there and demolishes Leon Edwards, which a lot of people think he's going to. I think he's going to win the fight. I don't think he's going to demolish him. Mm-hmm. But who knows? They may.
He's jumping the line. Yeah. He's jumping. They put him at number 15 in the 170-pound division after having 1 fight in 170. I get he's had 2 at 185, but he's number 15 right now. That came out after they announced he's fighting number 3 Leon Edwards. So he's taking a big 12-person jump.
Yep.
To fight Leon. Basically, how this works is if he beats Leon, he gets that number 3 spot.
Yep.
Everybody else moves down the list a little bit. And right then, we always talk about it, strike when the iron's hot. There isn't an iron hotter than Chimaev right now. And if he comes off a win from Leon Edwards, then we've got the hottest thing in MMA taking place at 170. Yep. And I think he does potentially jump over even if the other 2 guys.
Wow. Yeah, 170 is super exciting right now.
Super competitive, super exciting. And with all the stuff going on with 155, 170, it just seems like now we know all the horses that are in the race, and now we get to see them race and see who's going to get the run at the title.
Yeah, you definitely know who all the suspects are.
Right,
essentially.
like at 155, for example, to contrast it, we don't know what Michael Chandler's going to bring. Obviously, he's going to bring a tough night out for whoever he fights, but we don't know if he's a true contender right there. We don't know what Tony Ferguson versus Oliveira is going to bring us. We don't know what some of these big fights, how they're going to play out, what Conor and Dustin are going to do. But we do know what we have these fights pretty much booked up for 170, and now just time is holding us, is between us.
Yeah, time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is going to be exciting. But I do think that they're going to bring these two in for the Ultimate Fighter, Masvidal and Covington, and I think that would be the right move. I think it's a perfect way to bring the show back, and I think everybody else has got their dance card filled at 170 right now, except for those two, and why not go ahead and fill it?
Yeah, and the biggest fight the 170-pound division could make right now is for the BMF strap.
Possibly Colby, the biggest fight the UFC could make right now.
Right, and they always say if you're going to bring something back, come back with a bang. The Ultimate Fighter's coming back, and this is the biggest bang they could possibly make.
Most definitely. Guys, let us know in the comments. Do you think these two are going to be coaching the Ultimate Fighter, or are we way off? Who do you think is going to coach it? We think they'd be great. Also, let us know, are those two going to fight each other next, or will they have other opponents? And as always, guys, I appreciate you watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and check us out where you listen to audio. We're there.
Have a good one, y'all.
Have a good one.